hello to anyone who is joining us after the fact for our rugby midrash. We are so glad to know that there are others following along. We hope you get something out of it. All right, let us begin with prayer. And this is a collect that is often read, often prayed on Rogation days. And as we are coming up to Rogation Sunday, and this is also a good theme for what we're going to read today in Genesis 4, let us pray. O merciful Creator, your hand is open wide to satisfy the needs of every living creature. Make us always thankful for your loving providence, and grant that we, remembering the account that we must one day give, may be faithful stewards of your good gifts. Through Jesus Christ, our Lord, who with you and the Holy Spirit lives and reigns, one God, forever and ever. Amen.
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 Sorry if I start sneezing, you'll know why.
Not to mention more great gifts.
Exactly. Yeah, to Elon's point, it's all God's abundance, and without the pollen, we wouldn't have the trees and we wouldn't have the pollinators. So I'm grateful. It's just,
And we wouldn't have the allergies.
and we wouldn't have the allergies. Exactly.
Well,
Exactly.
there's always a serpent.
That's right. Well, very good. Very good, Kelly. So next Wednesday, I have to be at a mandatory clergy conference up at Claggett. So I will not be able to do Bible study with you next week. So I am suggesting that you all read chapter 5 on your own and not to talk about on Zoom. When you look at it, you'll see why. Chapter 5 is genealogies, and I mean, while it's interesting and might be revelatory in a certain way, I don't know that it's the stuff of deep discussion. So it worked out well that we would be on chapter 5 next week. So if you all would like to read 5 as homework, I'll remind you, and I can send you you have the altar version. I sent you that already. But obviously whatever translation you want to read is great. If you read that on your own, then we can pick up with Genesis 6 in 2 weeks, which I think would be a good use of our time and keep things moving along. So just again, this is just to remind us, and I think we all know this, that the first 11 chapters of Genesis are considered the prehistory, the primordial history, sometimes here it's called. And these are all, as the heading implies here, stories of communal origins, etiologies. Why are things the way they are? And so these early stories are really kind of fun to read as a result. So last week I told you about this book, Reading Genesis by Marilyn Robinson, and Donna has started reading it. I know that. I don't know if anybody else has. But I want to share, I thought that this paragraph here was interesting with regard to our conversations thus far. And I thought I would just share this and see if anyone had any thoughts or reaction to it. Robinson says this: the manifestations of fallenness in any individual person are a matter of what we experience as choice or character. The predisposition can be called rebellion against God. But there is a complication of the conception of human evil in the fact that male and female, Adam and Eve, they were exalted in their creation as images of God. When they fell, the ground was cursed, but they were not. And we were made subject not to God, but to difficulty and necessity. And reality was changed with reference to our transgressions, which would be ongoing. That human beings were so central to the creation that it would be changed by them, albeit for the worse, is whatever else, a kind of tribute to what we are. And I didn't know if anyone had any thoughts about that or any reaction. And if not, that's absolutely fine. Oops, sorry.
I don't understand why it's, I don't, maybe somebody could take a stab at explaining that. That by the change was attributed to what we are. That everything's changed for the worse.
Well, I think what she's saying is that as humans, last week we talked a little bit about the question of human exceptionalism and whether we are the capstone of creation or not. I think the point that she's making is the Genesis story sets it up so that the fall of humans has the power to affect the rest of creation. And so that says something about us as powerful or distinct or separate in some way. That's how I read that. I don't know how anyone else hears it, but that's what I took away from that. And even having a negative impact on creation. And P.S., we still are having a negative impact on creation, as we very well know, is a reflection of our power and our distinctiveness. That's how I heard it. Anyone else have any other thoughts?
So I'm kind of struck by the sentence, they and we were made subject not to God, but to difficulty and necessity. I understand the difficulty and necessity part, but I guess it's the word subject.
Well, so they were subjected to, I think that's really.
Oh, it's a subject, you're using it as a verb.
Right, we're made
to.
Yeah, we're made subject is, I think what she's saying is they were subjected to difficulty and necessity.
But not
Well,
God.
I hear that sentence as that resonates with me in the terms that we humans have to respond to the difficulty and the necessity, and to, as we evolve, overcome it and move to a closer back to our a better state.
I'm seeing that it means that we've become circumscribed by difficulty and necessity. We need to account for it. But is this saying that we're not God's subjects, though? I mean, we're in His image.
No, it's saying if you, and this is where Robinson's prose is a little bit dense.
A little bit.
It's saying it's saying that we weren't made subject to God with the fall. And so I think that she is saying from the very beginning, and the problem is that I've excerpted this from a larger piece. But she is, we are made in the image of God per Genesis, and therefore we are in relationship to God. But what she's saying is the fall didn't make us didn't impact our relationship with God, but it did bring about difficulty and necessity. Does that make sense?
Almost.
Maybe if I saw the whole thing. I just kind of, exactly what Ellie said. It's that it seems like we were sort of removed from God a little bit.
If you focus on this phrase, when they fell, that's the operative phrase here. So it's when that happened, they and we were made subject not to God, because we were already in relationship with God, but we were subjected to difficulty and necessity. I believe that's what she's saying here.
Okay.
But for me, the most interesting thing, and the reason I wanted to share this, was reality was changed with reference to our transgressions, which would be ongoing. Ain't that the truth? And then this idea that humankind, human beings, had the power to impact creation. That just really struck me. Now, obviously, I've been reading these stories my entire life, but I had not thought about the fact that it's the ground that's cursed and not Adam and Eve. And so, what does that say? And it made me more sensitive and aware of my own impact on creation. That's why I pulled this out, because it just caught my attention. and made me think about my relationship personally with creation in a different way. And, you know, if we read the Adam and Eve story sort of archetypally as, you know, models or symbols or types of humankind, then we see what happens as a result of our disobedience, our not listening, because that's literally what disobedience means. Obeir means to listen. And so disobedience is not to listen. Anyone who has children knows that. So, any other thoughts? I didn't mean to derail us with this. Again, I thought this idea of our impact was interesting. Go ahead, Ray. Sorry.
It's just two thoughts. I'll try to make it brief. One of them is human beings were so central. In the story, we're more or less an afterthought. And still part of creation, but creation itself was getting along just fine. So I don't know. And then it also brought to mind some theology from the 70s, perhaps, where we were talking about human beings seen as co-creators. As you're saying, we can influence the environment, the creation. Just brought back some old stuff.
What do you all think of the idea that humans are an afterthought in the Genesis accounts?
No, I think they were the final thought, final creation.
I agree with Elon.
But what I don't like is the sentence there I don't like is when they fell, the ground was cursed, but they were not. I don't believe the ground can be cursed.
Well, if we're taking what she's saying is that's what Genesis says. And that's what we were reading last week. From, you know, because you listened to the voice of your wife and have eaten of the tree about which I commanded you, you shall not eat. Cursed is the ground because of you. So she's really saying that
Okay.
in the Genesis story, that's what happens, is that God says the ground is cursed, but God doesn't curse Adam and Eve. And again, I had never really focused on that. So that was interesting.
Yeah.
It's cursed. That explains why it's so hard to earn a living out of it.
And I think that's, you know, when we think of these as stories of etiology, of origins, of why things are the way they are, I think that's exactly right. I think that's what that's meant to convey. And of course, you know, this is why women struggle with childbirth and are in pain and labor, you know, according to this story, is because of human disobedience. And we can decide for ourselves whether we buy that or not. But that's what the story as presented. All right. Did anyone have a chance to look at and I just sent it this morning, the very short Hirschfeld piece. If you haven't, I would love for you to take 5 minutes to read it at some point, because it's just interesting. Because last week we talked a lot about shame for obvious reasons. And now I will.
Sorry, I didn't see it.
That's okay. I sent it out with the link for today.
So
it's just a couple, maybe 4 or 5 pages, but it's a very, very quick read. But the whole idea of shame, and so I was just wondering if anyone had a chance to look at it. Ray, I think you did, right?
I did, yeah. I haven't got any deep thoughts about it, but it was observing a shame honor culture and the power of shame as the root of a lot of human evil is, I thought it was an interesting take. Useful take.
Well, and the reason I have that is that's a book that I have, when I taught at St. Andrews, and I taught a 10th grade biblical theology course, and we began with Genesis, of course. I always shared that section with my students because, high school students are all about shame and shaming. And it was fascinating to have those conversations with them and to think about, is it God's intention for us to experience shame? Is that godly, or is that something about human nature? So anyway, I encourage you all to take a quick look at that if you get a chance. All right. And then these are the images of the fall that we looked at last week. Okay. So all of that to say, here we go with chapter 4. And what I have on the screen again is the Alter translation. But if you have your own translation at home that you want to read, by all means, do that. It's interesting to have a variety of voices. Would somebody like to read for us? Let's see. If we read 1 through 7, that's a good chunk. We could pause there, and I will advance the screen. Would somebody like to read that for us?
I can read it. I have it a little larger type here.
Good. Okay, perfect. Unfortunately I can't make it any bigger, and that's the
That's
problem.
okay.
Oh, there it is. No, I can. Yeah.
Oh, okay. And the human knew Eve, his woman, and she conceived and bore Cain. And she said, I have got me a man with the Lord. And she bore as well his brother Abel. And Abel became a herder of sheep, while Cain was a tiller of the soil. As it happened in the course of time that Cain brought from the fruit of the soil an offering to the Lord, and Abel too had brought from his choice firstlings of his flock. Yes, there's a period there. No, and the Lord regarded Abel and his offering, but he did not regard Cain. And
Whoops, sorry. This is
and
smaller. Sorry, this does
It's-
not work so well. Oh, I apologize. Thank you for your patience. Let me make it smaller. Okay. Okay.
regard Cain and his offering, and Cain was very incensed, and his face fell. And the Lord said to Cain, why are you incensed? Why is your face fallen? For whether you offer well or whether you do not, at the 10th flap, sin crouches, and for you it's longing. For you is its longing, and you will rule over it. And Cain
Thanks.
said,
Oh, if you pause there.
okay, consider
Um,
it paused.
Okay. Sorry. Oh my gosh, this is frustrating. Okay. So what do you notice at the beginning of this story with Cain and Abel and their offerings to God? Hmm? You don't notice anything?
Yeah.
Well, we have possibly a birth order question. We have an occupational question. We have maybe God doesn't like vegetables. I don't know.
What is the difference between, there's a nuance between what Abel offers and what Cain offers. Does anyone pick that up?
Yeah, it's the fruit of the ground, which maybe was not sort of the best that he could have brought, versus the flock, the best of the flock. It doesn't say anything that it was the best of what
Well,
he
it,
was tilling.
yes, exactly.
Choice.
So Abel brings from the choice firstlings of his flock. Abel gives the best to God. Cain, this is exactly right, Louise. Cain brings from the fruit of the soil an offering to the Lord. Sure, it's fine. Is it his best? Is it the best of the fruit of the soil? The text doesn't say that. We don't know,
Right,
but the
right.
text is very specific about Abel. So that's something to pay attention to there. And I wanted to point out that line that made me giggle when Ray read it. I've got me a man with the Lord. This is again why so much is lost on us with an English translation of the Hebrew. And so Alter takes the time to explain it. Eve's naming speech puns on the verb kana, to get, acquire, or perhaps to make, and Cain, Cain. His name actually means smith. And so Eve, upon bringing forth the third human being, imagines herself as a kind of partner of God in man making. And again, that would be totally lost if we didn't have Alter's translation there. Anything else?
I think the RSV with I have got me a man with the help of the Lord makes it a lot more clear.
Ah, okay.
Mm.
And I mean, I guess after going through childbirth, she figured this was really a dicey situation and God helped me get through this. And then he did.
You kind of feel that way as a mother anyway. Wow, this is a creation and it
Yeah.
came from me. And how did, yeah. Oh, yeah, God helped, but
Oh, well, I meant it really differently that childbirth is so difficult.
mhm.
And especially there was no obstetrician on call then.
Epidural.
No. And I've always thought it was very interesting that the curse for Eve for eating from the tree of knowledge was difficulty in childbearing. And the reason childbearing is so hard for human beings is because of the huge head. I mean, if you ever watched kittens or puppies, it's not a big deal.
Mhm.
Their little heads just slip right out.
Exactly.
What's in the head is all the knowledge.
All that brain that's just pre-developed.
Mhm.
I love that, Donna. And that's, Lord knows that's true. I hadn't made that connection with the tree of knowledge of good and evil before. I love that. I love how this group does theology. It's wonderful.
Or lack of.
Stop. So Cain was incensed that his offering was not pleasing to God and his face fell. And so look at with what God says to Cain, why are you incensed and why is your face fallen? For whether you offer well or whether you do not, at the tent flap sin crouches. How's that for an image? And for you is its longing, but you will rule over it. What do you make of that?
Well, Cain did not rule over sin because he went out and killed Abel.
Mm.
So the statement is hard to believe.
The NRSV translates it, you must master it. So maybe the you will isn't so much a prediction as it is man. You will rule over it. And of course, as soon as, sin is crouching at the tent flap, the possibility of failure is right there as well, right? What do you make of that image at the tent flap, sin crouches?
Right around the corner where you can't see it.
Yeah.
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 Lurking.
Yeah. And throughout the Bible, right, we have this, right? We began with the serpent in the garden. We have the sin crouching. It's interesting because here sin is really personified, right? It's not the serpent. It's not, you know, the guy with the pitchfork and the tail and the funny ears. But it's sin is crouching and you will rule over it. And it reminds me of in the Gospel of Luke, after Jesus is tempted in the wilderness for 40 days, it says Satan left him and waited for an opportune time. And so you have this image of the rest of that gospel, Satan is sort of crouching at the tent flap, waiting for his moment. And of course, that moment comes with Judas. But just that image I just find that really evocative. The NRSV renders it, sin is, let's see, where is it? Sin is lurking at the door. But I like at the tent flap, sin crouches. Anything else there? Or should we go on? All right. Would someone like to pick up at 8, and I will hopefully more deftly move things forward for it?
I mean, I'll read it, but can I read it from my book?
Yeah.
Okay, so Cain said to Abel, his brother, "Let us go out to the field." And when they were in the field, Cain rose up against his brother Abel and killed him. Then the Lord said to Cain, "Where is Abel your brother?" He said, "I do not know. Am I my brother's keeper?" And the Lord said, "What have you done? The voice of your brother's blood is crying to me from the ground. And now you are cursed from the ground, which has opened its mouth to receive your brother's blood from your hand. When you till the ground, it shall no longer yield to you its strength. You shall be a fugitive and a wanderer on the earth." Cain said to the Lord, "My punishment is greater than I can bear. Behold, thou hast driven me this day away from the ground, and from thy face I shall be hidden, and I shall be a fugitive and a wanderer on the earth, and whoever finds me will slay me." Want me to keep going?
Can you just read?
Sure. Then the Lord said to him, "Not so. If anyone slays Cain, vengeance shall be taken on him sevenfold." And the Lord put a mark on Cain, lest any who came upon him should kill him.
Thank you. All right. Again, a familiar story. Was there anything here that maybe you'd forgotten or that you wonder about or that caught your attention?
Yes, sorry to jump right down to the verse, and the Lord put a mark on Cain, lest anyone who came upon him should kill him. Well, where were the others coming from to kill?
That is the $64,000 question.
Only 2 other people.
That's a great question.
We have to wait a few chapters until we find out the daughters of men. Oh, wait, there were other people around. Wait,
Where'd they come from?
I
Oh,
had to stick them in somehow. Book is being retconned. Oh, we have to. I made the statement, and now I have to go figure out. Go back and set it in.
exactly. Oh, they needed a good editor, Ellie. Oh. So
Is it possible he thinks he doesn't really know that he's it, or is he just foreseeing the future that that there are going to be more people?
Oh, right.
maybe.
I mean, because that's such an important part of the story,
Mm-hmm. It certainly is.
because that's the forgiveness.
Mm-hmm.
To me, that's kind of a huge
Absolutely.
point.
Absolutely. This idea of mercy, right? That, it's not retributive justice. Cain killed Abel, therefore God will allow Cain to be killed. No, God protects Cain.
But I'm thinking Cain does, I mean, they don't really, he doesn't really necessarily know
Mm-hmm.
that there could be other people.
Well, and then obviously eventually there will.
And eventually there are a lot of other people.
I just want to point out this first note down here from Robert Alter. There are several verbal echoes of Adam's interrogation by God and Adam's curse, setting up a general biblical pattern in which history is seen as a cycle of approximate and significant recurrences. Adam's being driven from the garden to till a landscape of thorn and thistle is replayed here in God's insistence that Cain is cursed by. The preposition also could mean of or from the soil, Adamah, that had hitherto yielded its bounty to him. Because again, as Louise pointed out before, Cain is the tiller of the soil, right? And so now it's the very soil that is going to be problematic for him. The biblical imagination is equally preoccupied with the theme of exile. This is already the second expulsion. Mind you, we're only at the beginning of chapter 4. And with the arduousness or precariousness of agriculture, a blessing that easily turns into blight. And going back to what Ray said earlier about how hard it is to make one's living, to survive off the land, still true today.
I think that later in the story, and we're gonna read it soon, that Cain's line become the herders, nomadic people, so
Mhm.
that they aren't tilling the soil.
Mhm.
They're not tilling the soil, and
They
in
can't.
that context, there may be mercy for Cain, but he's living with the consequences, punished
Exactly.
by his sin.
Exactly. My punishment is too great to bear, and yet he's going to have to bear it, right? And he self-identifies as no, sorry, God says, a restless wanderer shall you be on the earth. And then Cain picks that up. I must hide from your presence. And so that's, Alter doesn't comment on that, but this is also the second time someone is hidden from God. I guess Cain comes by it naturally. His parents did it, and now he's doing it. And he picks up the same language. I shall be a restless wanderer on the earth. And so there's that theme of being a nomad, right? Not having a plot of earth to call his own, to stay stationary and constant.
We
Well,
also,
also,
I mean, if we're assuming that by the language that there are other people, which I think is reasonable, then he is also being kicked out of the community where he is,
Mhm.
and he is losing much more than just a livelihood.
Beautiful. Ellie, you were going to say something.
well, that Cain's original career seems to be agriculture.
Mhm.
I don't know if he chose it but that was his life. That was what he did, and therefore to be a wanderer and to be cursed by the soil that he's been tilling is extra punishment. He can't farm anymore, even if he wanted to, because you can't stay in one place.
And so there's an identity element to that, right? Because as you say, Ellie, that's what he did for whatever reason. That's what he did. And now that he must give that up, or it's been taken from him. I wanted to just point out Alter's note here at the bottom, and this picks up on Elon's point. Whoever finds me will kill me. This and the subsequent report of Cain with a wife in the land of Nod are a famous inconsistency. Either the writer was assuming knowledge of some other account of human origins involving more than a single founding family, or because the schematic simplicity of the single nuclear family plot impeded narrative development after Cain's banishment, he decided not to bother with consistency. So, don't worry about it, I guess is what Alter.
I'm writing the word of God, don't argue.
Anything else? And again, we have this theme. So God confronts Cain. Where is Abel, your brother? And Cain, I don't know. Am I my brother's keeper? Famous line. My own children have used that against me. But similarly to his parents, or his mom, who says, well, the snake, Adam says, Eve made me do it. Eve says, the serpent made me do it. It's the same kind of defensiveness against God, which, doesn't really get him very far.
Back to shame.
Beautiful. Yep. Anything else there? Should we press on? Okay. So we're about to finish the story of Cain and Abel, and then we will have a little bit of the beginnings of the genealogy, which I guess we can read here. And then, chapter 5 will be on our own. Would someone like to read the, there from here until the end? There's a lot of names, so just be bold. Wants to do it.
Yeah, and you've already read, so you knew these were coming up. Shall I try it?
Oh, yes, please.
I had an edition of the Bible that had little, all the names were divided into syllables and accented, so you could make some idea.
Oh, that is
cool. And Cain went out from the Lord's presence and dwelled in the land of Nod, east of Eden. And Cain knew his wife, and she conceived and bore Enoch. Then he became the builder of a city, and called the name of the city like his son's name, Enoch. And Irad was born to Enoch, and Irad begot Mehujael. And you your spelling problems, Mehujael begot Methusael, and Methusael begot Lamech. And Lamech took him 2 wives. The name of the one was Ada, and the name of the other was Zillah. And Ada bore Jabal. He was the first of tent dwellers with livestock. And his brother's name was Jubal. He was the first of all who played he's the first of all who play on the lyre and pipe. As for Zillah, she bore Tubal-Cain, who forged every tool of copper and iron. And the sister of Tubal-Cain was Naamah. And Lamech said to his wives, Ada and Zillah, O hearken my voice, you wives of Lamech, give ear to my speech. For a man have I slain for my wound, a boy for my bruising. For 7-fold Cain is avenged, and Lamech 77. And Adam again knew his wife, and she bore a son and called his name Seth, as to say, God has granted me other seed in place of Abel, for Cain has killed him. And as for Seth, to him too a son was born, and he called his name Enosh. It was then that the name of the Lord was first invoked.
Thank you. All right. So we probably need to look at some footnotes here. Okay, so here, this is what we were talking about. Cain goes out from the Lord's presence and dwells in the land of Nod, east of Eden, and suddenly he has a wife. And then we see the generations that come out of their union. Interesting note. A couple of interesting notes. The land of Nod is cognate with wanderer. So Cain goes out to the land of wandering, we might say, and that's where he finds himself a wife. The builder of the city, he became the builder of a city. The first recorded founder of a city is also the first murderer, a possible reflection of the anti-urban bias in Genesis. And when we get to Babel, we might think about that again. And Jubal was the first of all who play in the lyre and pipe. I believe the name the word jubilation comes from that, or jubilant. What, did anything strike you, or do you wonder about any of this genealogy? We probably need to talk about this section, the sister of Tubal-Cain, and Lamech said to his wives. All right, let me just read this note. Whoops, sorry, this is not very helpful. Okay. The narrative context of this poem is long lost, but it looks like a warrior's triumphal song cast as a boast to his wives. Unlike the looser form of the earlier poetic insets, this poem follows the parallelistic patterns of biblical verse with exemplary rigor. Every term in each initial verset has its semantic counterpart in the second verset. Okay, well, we're not having the Hebrew in front of us makes it a little harder. In the Hebrew, the first pair of versets has 4 accented syllables in each. Every subsequent verset has 3. The last pair of versets with its numbers provides a paradigm case. This isn't helpful. All right. So I'm just going to go down here to the bottom. Perhaps then what Lamech is saying quite barbarically is not only has he killed a man for wounding him, he has not hesitated to kill a mere boy for hurting him. So there is sort of the intensification of what happened with Cain and Abel.
Does Lamech mean anything?
That is a good question. Let me look at Alter. Let's see if Alter says that. No, I don't think so. Let me see. Enoch's name means culture, but I don't think Lamech's name means anything. So then we have the birth of Adam and Eve's third son, Seth. God has granted me other seed in place of Abel. And then Seth has a son named Enosh. It was then that the name of the Lord was first invoked. That is the distinctive Israelite designation, Yahweh, as the Lord. The existence of primordial monotheism is an odd biblical notion that seeks to reinforce the universalism of the monotheistic idea. In other words, that we tend to think of monotheism as arising with Abraham, right? Generations later. But what they're saying here is that the authors of Genesis are trying to universalize that and suggest that there was already an understanding of one God at this point. And it's, you know, it's sort of retrofitting, if you will. And then, of course, it says this claim is contradicted by the report in Exodus that only with Moses was the name Yahweh revealed to man. So again, you know, thinking about these stories, not literally, but as stories of, you know, a people's origin and explanation of a people's origin. So figure people are writing these stories generations later and crafting them to fit the needs of their people. You know, if you've ever sat around the Thanksgiving table and, you know, grandpa starts telling the story of, you know, when he came over to this country, and, you know, there's a larger than life quality to some of these origin stories, right? And that's certainly what we get here.
Just going back to Lamech, I've just been looking up in another reference Bible, and
good.
it doesn't say anything about Lamech.
Oh, okay.
It skips over him.
let me just see if it says anything in the Hebrew. It means powerful.
Ah,
The fifth lineal descendant from Cain, husband of Ada and Zillah, father of sons Jabal, Jubal, and Tubal Cain, and daughter Nama. We just read that. Father of Noah. So, okay, so it means powerful. So that's interesting, right? So
mm,
Lamech means powerful, and Lamech has avenged someone who hurt him. What does that suggest? What does that suggest that the story is trying to convey?
pride and strength.
Mm-hmm.
Also kind of overweening pride. Not only
Yes.
Cain only got avenged 7 times, Lamech has avenged himself 77 times, and so there.
Yeah.
Mm.
Sorry, guys, it's sort of toxic masculinity, when we talk about but when you think about that, I'm going to show you, there's a lot of testosterone flying around that paragraph. A man I have slain for my wound, a boy for my bruising, exactly, overweening, disproportionate response. So I wonder if it's calling into question this idea of power. Because it's just sort of a ridiculous response.
Mm.
To digress, a colleague of Top's is a Middle Eastern specialist, and what she doesn't know about the Middle East, you could stick in your eye. She was brilliant, and she, in talks in the department, why is this going like this in the Middle East? And she said, the culture is this. If you hurt me, I hurt you back twice. And of course, the other side, well, you hurt twice, I'm going to hurt you 4 times. And it goes until like there's nothing left. And that's what happens. I mean, look at Gaza right now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You have no pride as a man unless you take revenge and hurt the other guy worse.
Exactly. Extreme revenge. Yeah. Yeah. That's not a digression at all. There's a straight through line there. Absolutely. Um, and so it's sort of it's interesting that his name means powerful. And we might critique it now and say, yeah, is that what I would say, reading it as Christians with the eyes of Jesus, who wields power incredibly differently, to read this now, it problematizes that name powerful, I think, because is that what real power looks like? Just slamming the other guy 77 times as hard as, I don't know. It's a question probably worth pondering.
Ellie said she digressed, but I'll really digress. I mean, Ellie didn't digress. This reminds me of Melania Trump, because she said, if you punch him, he will come back twice as hard and punch you back. So, I mean, this is very modern.
It's not his culture, but that's just his character.
Yeah.
And again, I don't think that's a digression at all. And that's, again, we think about what does it mean to wield power? And, what does Jesus say? Jesus is really clear, right? What does he say? If someone slaps you on the cheek, what are you supposed to do?
Turn the other cheek.
Yeah, it's the opposite of this retaliation and retributive justice. And so I'll speak just for myself, because that's really the only person for whom I can or should speak. But it's, as I read this as a lifelong Christian, it strikes me as so foreign, and yet knowing full well that much of the world still operates this way, right? But for Jesus, this is exactly the opposite. And so, I think, Jesus is problematizing this very story. When you read this, sevenfold Cain is avenged, Lamech 70 and 7. Where did we hear that number 70 and 7 in the gospel?
Forgiveness.
Yeah. When
Mm.
exactly when Peter asked Jesus, how many times should I forgive someone who's wronged me? As many as 7. And of course, Peter thinks that that's a really generous number. And Jesus says 70 times 7. And of course, in the Bible, 70 is sort of, the number of infinity, right?
Mhm.
And so this idea, that's a direct connection to this story and Lamech's boasting of avenging 70 and 7.
7
Jesus
comes
was
up
the
other
number
times in the Bible too. It's the
Mhm.
7, the
Yeah.
creation story.
Yep.
It's
Yep.
another 7.
Yep. Exactly. Exactly. And so, and that's why it's a number of infinity. Like every time you see the number 40 in the Bible, whether it's 40 days in the wilderness or 40 years, of the people of Israel wandering, it's a very long time. It's a very, it's a big number. And so 7 also has a connotation. So exactly. So, yeah. So when Jesus says that you should forgive 70 times 7, for his audience, who would be familiar with this story, that's like bing, 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 bing. Oh, okay. That's the opposite of Lamech. I get it. Anything else about chapter 4 that strikes you?
Well, just the fact that Adam had another son. So much, I mean, she must have been really old by then. And,
Seriously.
I mean, you're talking about generations later.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, that's again one of those, interesting narrative, chronologies. It's like, what? Yeah, because
Or
right.
else they just put it in there at the end.
Mhm.
It's not chronological. I think it's ends. He was following all this story, and now he goes. Meanwhile, back
Yeah.
at the ranch.
Maybe,
Hmm.
yeah.
Mm.
I
Maybe.
think it really underlines how important sons are and what a gift it was to these people to have sons, and how bereft they would be to have one son killed and the other son banished.
Mm.
But God had mercy and gave them a son.
Good point.
It's a
Beautiful.
good point. Yeah.
Beautiful. God has granted me other seed in place of Abel. I'm curious as to what the Hebrew word there is for seed. Hang on one second. That's verse Zerah, seed sowing offspring. Whoop. Yeah, and again, I wonder if that's meant to be a pun. Obviously when we think of seed, we think of uh, the male's contribution to conception, but I wonder too if there isn't some pun there about agriculture and
Mhm.
hitting the ground and fertilizing and all of that. Again, even though these stories of origin, seem somewhat primitive, the authors of Genesis are anything but. There's such sophistication in the way they use the language and these puns and plays on words and double entendres and all of that. Which again, even though I seem to be having such great difficulty projecting it on the screen, I think that the Alter translation is so helpful because of his notes, if nothing else, because so much would just be lost on me. I'll again speak just for myself. But yeah. Anything else before we quit?
do you think, when Lamech is talking to his wives, I mean, it's like he's threatening them.
Oh, no, I
That's
think
the
it's
way I
just
read it.
proud. Oh, that's how you, okay, I don't see it that way.
I don't know.
He's just bragging.
I mean, if they did anything mean to him
Oh.
or something,
Seriously,
he
listen to
perceived
me.
as not the way a wife is supposed to act. I mean, to me,
It's sort of
it's just me reading it.
no, I don't think it's just you, Louise. It's sort of a shot across the bow, right? Hearken my voice, you wives of Lamech, give ear to my speech. I think it's a tough
Yeah.
and so, just in case you're wondering, let me thump my chest and
Yeah.
know that that's the kind of guy I am. Yeah, I kind of hear it that way too, Louise, frankly. And
Okay.
maybe it's a modern sensibility that I'm
Right,
posing,
right.
but that's how I hear it too. Yeah,
And of course, they didn't have any options, but it's
exactly,
like a warning to them.
exactly, exactly. And when you think culturally about the role of women and what Donna just reminded us about the importance of the male child and all of this, it makes sense. So all right. So next week we won't meet. I will remind everybody of that. Feel free to go ahead and read chapter 5 if you want. The beginning of chapter 5 will probably be helpful because it, connects some dots after Adam. Chapter 5 is really setting us up for the Noah story. And so you see how, the lineage works from Adam down to Noah. But, I don't think it's the stuff of deep conversation. But then we'll pick up next time, 2 weeks from now, with Noah and that wonderful story. All right.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thanks.
Thank you all.
Plot
Thanks, Patty.
thickens, everybody. All right.
Bye.
Bye.